cancer is seldom a medical emergency. There's time to think, there's time to research, and then go in with all your heart, mind, and spirit, and you'll have better results.
Welcome, Ozonauts, to another week of ozone therapy expert interviews. This week we interviewed the famous, the Dr. Tony Jimenez. If you don't know Dr. Tony Jimenez, he runs one of the most popular integrative cancer clinics in the entire world. This guy is brilliant, yet he's so down to earth. I really enjoyed our conversation today. This guy traveled the entire planet looking for effective, integrative, and natural treatments for cancer. 92% of his patients have stage 4 cancer, but despite that, he's still been able to demonstrate extremely good success rates. So this was a really exciting episode because we got into the nitty-gritty of what Dr. Tony Jimenez is doing to get these success rates. Now, cancer has affected many of us. Many of you who know my story know that I had a brother. I worked with him for 6 years in this sphere, and he unfortunately did pass away from cancer. So this is very near and dear to my heart, and that's not abnormal. Many of you have been affected by cancer. And even for people who haven't been affected by cancer yet, the statistics show that it is likely that either you or somebody you know closely is going to get cancer. So this is an important episode because it's going to show you some of the different tools and modalities that are out there. Today, Dr. Tony Jimenez took the opportunity to educate us on what he's doing to treat cancer and how oxygenation and ozone therapy are extremely vital roles to that. So take a look because this is going to be very valuable information for you and people you know. Are you ready, you feel like? Ready to get into this kind of deal?
Yeah. I comb my hair, everything's good.
Okay, hair looks good. Brushed your teeth, everything's clean.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for taking the time out of your day just to do this. It's super awesome to be able to talk with you. You know, I've heard you speak a lot of different times, and I always appreciate what you bring to the table and just your very integrative, holistic view of cancer. But for the viewers that are watching, I think until you've been approached by cancer or it's touched your life, it's a little bit easy to trivialize it because it's just so common. But can you give us a kind of a view of how pervasive cancer is, or what is the scope of cancer in the United States or the world today?
Surely, and it's a pleasure to be here and, just to share many years of experience and traveling the world. And one of the misconceptions is that we're gaining on cancer. And if we looked at published information, the statistical gains that have been achieved in cancers is practically two reasons. One is less smoking, people are smoking less, and early detection. So the statistical gain on the outcome of cancer is not due to treatment. And that's an important thing to remember, because if we look at the literature and publications and predictions going back 5 years, we now know that cancer is killing twice as many people and will be continuing that as compared to, for example, 1968. And it is an epidemic, right? It's said that the second largest killer in the world is cancer. 8.8 million people, lives, and this is in 2015, were taken by cancer. So now we're in 2019 and things are not getting better. So for example, they predict that by the year 2030, there'll be an increase of 70% new cases of cancer and 45% increase in total deaths. And so however alarming these numbers are, it's the reality. 1 in every 2 men will have cancer sometime in their lifetime, and 1 in every 3 females. One thing I'm seeing in clinical practice as compared to 10, 15 years ago is that we're getting patients that are younger with more rare cancers and even common cancers. For example, we have a 16-year-old with ovarian cancer. I've never saw this before. We have a 22-year-old with colon cancer. So we're seeing younger populations of both male and females coming to hope for cancer to us, with this diagnosis as before. And even breast cancer, which is the most common cancer, 20-year-olds, before it was 60 and above, 60 years of age and above. So it's truly very pervasive and not getting any better, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a very sobering view of what cancer is, because like I said, it's kind of easy just to, I guess, push it off because it's just something that may or may not happen later in life, and they'll have the cure, especially for people like me that are younger, they'll have the cure in 20 years, which is such a ridiculous thing that people think. But yeah, it's a very sobering perspective that how pervasive it actually is. So, and also, I think it was interesting that you commented on the statistical part of it, is that there might be a little bit less cancer, but it's actually getting worse. Whenever you see a statistic, you have to have more, you have to have relative points of data and other pieces of information to be able to look at. Otherwise, you're just grabbing one thing out of context and it's not really giving you a good overarching view. So I really appreciate you brought that to the table. So
Sure, if I could comment one thing here, I was looking at a journal. The title was Improving Healthcare Outcomes Worldwide, and this was July of 2014. And let me just read the introductory paragraph of this peer-reviewed publication. It says, over the past 20 years, the number of newly diagnosed cases of cancer and overall mortality rate for most common cancers has declined. But here's the kicker. While the mortality rates for advanced breast and prostate cancer remain unchanged, they have increased in patients under the age of 40 years. This raises the question how cancer is conceptualized and the methods used to detect the most aggressive cancers based on this conceptual model, right, of diagnosis and treating cancer as a local disease. So this is where the mindset is a bit lacking. And we know that 90% of cancer patients succumb to the metastasis, not the primary cancer. So very few people will die from breast cancer or from colon cancer. They die from these cancers going to the brain, to the lung, to the liver, and to the bone. And so 70 or more percent of the funds that are invested in cancer research are in studying the primary tumor. But 90% of the patients are succumbing because of the metastasis. So we have to switch this around and study metastatic cancer activity, right? Because this is the leading cause of death.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's just a complicated topic because you see like all these stats and figures on cure rates for cancer, right? But a lot of times they're just commenting on 5 years without cancer. So It's not really a cure. It's just, you put it off for 5 years without a sign of cancer. And I know we'll get into that in a little bit more, but it's just wild that they put out this very false perception about what cancer is. And they're not taking kind of that higher level view of the health of the person. They're taking these very specific structures and pointing to those, but it doesn't really give you a good broad view. And how would you say, Dr. Jimenez, as you've been working with cancer for a long time now and running, one of the most popular integrative clinics, how does cancer develop in a person?
That's always a big question, right? But let's simplify this. And first, I would say that cancer is an opportunistic disease, meaning that it can develop in anyone at any time, given the right conditions. And that is related to the terrain. That's related to the internal terrain. And I usually give a simple example. Here on my desk, there aren't any bugs or maggots or anything. It's nice and clean. What happens if after this interview, I leave my food, on this table and I come back 2 weeks later? There's bugs, there's maggots on the table. What changed? The only thing that changed was the terrain. So the internal terrain, as well as the external terrain that us humans are being exposed to more and more every day, is leading to the formation, the development, and the progression of cancer. So it is a systemic dysregulation. So that means that cancer has to do with a systemic breakdown of the immune system, of the endocrine system, the hormones. We're seeing a lot of thyroid problems in our cancer patients. 70% of our patients have thyroid dysfunction. So basically, in a nutshell, I believe that the development of cancer in any individual is related to the terrain internally, the dysregulation by foods, GMOs, toxicity, 5G, cell phones, lack of proper sleep, negative thoughts. This is where the emotional aspect of cancer comes in. And so, we can't live in a bubble. We just need to
Yeah.
work on these as prevention.
Yeah, and that seems to be a really common thread too, that, there's kind of this threshold that your body has the capacity to keep you healthy, but there's a certain point where it turns into cancer, or it turns into the symptoms of Lyme disease, turns
Right.
into the symptoms of metal toxicity. And I think that's just a testament to that there isn't a guarantee that you're necessarily going to avoid cancer, because it's just, you're in the world and there's pain and suffering everywhere. But there is minimizing the potential of developing a chronic disease through all these things that you're saying.
Yes.
So if somebody is, going down this road that they've been diagnosed with cancer and they're talking with a conventional doctor, looking at some of the conventional treatments, are there conventional treatments that would work for them? And if so, in what circumstances?
Well, if we look at conventional treatments, and they're described as we know, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and now the big wave is called immunotherapy, these so-called checkpoint inhibitors, and gene-targeted therapy. So this is the contents, this is the box of conventional therapy. And if we look at published work, we know that the 5-year survival with cancer, specifically metastatic cancer, is less than 25%, 5-year survival. And this is across the board, from more aggressive cancers to less aggressive cancers, like prostate, like breast. And then on the aggressive side, you have pancreatic cancer, brain tumors. These patients, even now in 2019, a patient diagnosed with pancreas cancer or brain tumors, it's 6 to 12 months, general typical survival. So also there have been meta-analysis done in 22 major cancers. This was done when they looked at from 1990 to the year 2004. This was done in Australia and in the US. And they found in Australia that there was a 2.3% 5-year survival with chemotherapy. In the US, it was 2.1% 5-year survival with chemotherapy. So the numbers were very close to each other, very accurate. And so obviously the conclusion is that chemotherapy, radiation, and these conventional therapies are Band-Aids approach. They're not addressing the cause of, the causes of cancer. And even with us at Hope for Cancer, 92% of our patients are stage 4. So they come to us when everything has failed. They're weak, emotionally distraught, and so many, they're behind the 8 ball, as I say. So we need to do more. And if someone that's watching this is on the conventional route or is thinking about doing conventional therapy, we respect that, and let's integrate. Let's do a fully integrative approach. And this is looking at cancer through a larger lens. And I often quote these 6 points with integrative medicine. One is that when we do integrative medicine, we're looking at all aspects of disease and wellness, because disease and cancer is just a lack of wellness. So when we're doing so-called anti-aging therapy for prevention, we're young, right? We're in our 30s, not really, but we're doing anti-aging, or anti-aging is really anti-cancer, right? We're promoting wellness. Secondly, in an integrative approach to cancer, we have to look at the underlying causes. What's behind this tumor? Because this tumor is a presentation, as I said earlier, a dysfunctional terrain and a systemic dysfunction also. And then we have to look at natural therapies, adding natural therapies, non-toxic, because the body has the ability to heal. That we know. That's very simple. We're designed to heal. We are created by our Creator, excuse the redundancy there, to be healthy, to be happy, and to be well. We weren't created to be sick. So the body has the ability to heal. And then as integrative physicians, we have to critically look at our outcomes. How can we do better? How can we provide better treatments to our patients? What are our statistics, right? So at Hope for Cancer, we've done that, and maybe we could share that later. And then we have to realize that integrative medicine is truly science-based, right? This is not quackery, as you know, we have references and publications to everything we do as integrative physicians. And then this very important part that I think it's definitely missing in conventional therapy, and maybe for sure decreasing the efficacy of this conventional therapy, is that engagement with the patient, that doctor-patient relationship, right? Being there for the patient throughout the journey, and not just, you know, writing the prescription for the chemo or the herb, but truly being there, and that's so important.
Yeah, and it seems like that's something you guys at Hope for Cancer do really well with, is actually listening, actually understanding, being empathetic with the patient. Because at the end of the day, and I know a little bit of your backstory, and we'll get into that more, but you're on this planet to help people, to alleviate suffering. And, you know, that's kind of a part of, you know, my family a little bit. That's part of our kind of, our call is to alleviate suffering in the world. And that is something that seems to be missing from the conventional system. And is that perspective or that emphasis on you're working with people. You need to make sure that they are well, not only, you know, from maybe you think that prescription is helping them, but you know, you need to be emotionally supporting them, because it's a really, really tough time. And it seems like that's something you guys do really well with. The other thing I like that you guys do is you say, well, it's not mutually exclusive to do conventional treatments and integrative. That's why it's called integrative, is because you can bring it into what you're already doing. So It's not necessarily like you have to get rid of it.
And one thing that comes to mind, if I could interrupt you, is
please.
The focus should be on the person, just like you said. So we treat the person with cancer, not the cancer in the person. Mm-hmm. See, that's a big paradigm shift and a big difference, because conventional therapy, to go back to your question, is treating the tumor. It's not treating the whole person. Mm-hmm. And that's where the big failure is, because now we know that the tumor is not an isolated mass or lesion or nodule. The tumor is an organ. It's the mass or the lesion, what we call the tumor. It's that matrix, that extracellular space, ground regulating system that surrounds the main tumor or the metastatic tumor. It's the blood supply, and it's also the lymphatic. So now we're treating an organ, right? And the organ has tissues, has cells, and so we have to treat the entire system. And that's when we could get the best outcome to our patients.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that if you have a patient who is emotionally and spiritually just in a good place, that they're at peace with themselves, is going to have a much easier road in treatment than somebody who comes in emotionally traumatized. Would you say that's true?
Exactly. So I think that a lot of our success is when they enter the doors of Hope for Cancer, because they're getting hugs, they're getting love, they're saying, you know, there is hope, faith, hope, gratitude, and love, or generosity and love, right? So just that will increase the success of any patient that comes to the doors of Hope for Cancer. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I know I'm kind of getting off on more of a philosophical thing here, and all of our viewers might not agree with this, but I believe that God put those types of emotions and behaviors in us, and that they yield positive results because God is those things. And for us to be like God is to be able to share in the life that he gives, and not to be a part of kind of the chaos or the things that bring us closer to death or towards destruction.
And interesting, you say it's philosophical, but it's also scientific, because there's been publications, peer-reviewed publications, where there's a group of cancer patients, 1,000 in one group and 1,000 in a second group. The group that was not prayed for by whomever, you know, Christians, Muslims, whoever, and the group that were prayed for, guess who had better outcome? The group that was prayed for, right? So definitely, it goes beyond philosophical. And I encourage all the viewers to really take a look at the emotional, spiritual aspect of the human being, because that's really, in my almost 30 years of experience, that's where the healing comes from. It's, of course, the physical will respond to how the emotional and, more importantly, the spiritual aspects are.
And even if it didn't improve the treatment of cancer, even if it didn't, you still have a better quality of life. You're at peace with where you're at. You feel confident where you're going. And just the quality of life you're going to have is so different. I don't think you can put a value on that.
Absolutely. We can't help everyone that comes to the doors. We help a lot of people, twice or triple the statistics that are brought out by the National Cancer Institute. But what you say is so right. I mean, just, we have patients that have passed, and the family members are still writing us letters, sending us Christmas cards, because the quality of life. 94% of our stage 4 cancer patients that were told to go home and there's nothing else to do, 94% of these patients have significant improvement in quality of life. That means they sleep better, no pain, they're happier, they're more ambulatory, they have an appetite, all these quality of life parameters. And that's huge, because none of us, right, know how long we're going to live, but we want to live the best quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes for people, it's kind of like you're on the outside looking in at what life is supposed to be like, but it kind of passes you by. So I appreciate that you guys put such an emphasis on that, because there's not a whole lot of places that people can find that kind of community and that kind of quality of life, especially in the cancer sphere, because it's become so, and I don't know why we're still barking up the tree. Well, I know why, but barking up the tree of chemotherapy and these other things that people are, we know that they don't work very well, yet we continue to pour billions into them. Every time you go to McDonald's, there's a little jar for chemotherapy, research and all those kinds of things. But we got a little derailed there. Let's get back to a couple things that I'm interested in talking about too. I've heard you talk about that 99% of the cancer tumor is actually non-cancer stem cells, and only 1% is a cancer stem cell. So could you elaborate on that?
Yes, and this is biology. This is not, Dr. Tony thinking of something strange. This is published information. So if someone has a tumor or a lymph node that's, let's say, 1 cubic centimeter, that means 1 by 1 by 1 centimeter. That tumor has approximately 1 billion cancer cells, and that's billion with a B. In that tumor, 99% of those cells are non-cancer stem cells. Those are the cells that are susceptible to chemo and radiation. So when someone is diagnosed with a tumor or a cancer, and then they're given these treatments, and then the oncologist said, great results, the tumor has shrunk by 10%, 50%, or you're now in remission. The PET scan, MRI, CAT scan doesn't see anything. Go home, come back in 3 months, 6 months for another test, and we'll be watchfully waiting. Well, what are they waiting for? For the cancer to show up again in a CAT scan? And that is that 1%. 1% of those 1 billion cells, which is a million, are cancer stem cells. Those are the cells. Those are really the bad guys. Those are the cells that are resistant to chemo, resistant to radiation, and not only that, they're made more aggressive, they mutate more, and they become more resistant to any therapy. So imagine the work that integrative doctors like myself have when we're seeing a stage 4 cancer patient who have had all conventional therapies, and they're coming to us as sometimes the last hope. So fortunately, there are therapies that can target these cancer circulating tumor cells, but for sure, chemo cannot and radiation cannot. So when the cancer is found again, what do oncologists say? You have a recurrence or you have a relapse. In effect, the cells were never destroyed, so it's not a relapse or recurrence. It's that now they aggregated those 1% or a portion of them, aggregated to form another tumor, right? Another thing I would like to say here, because this is important, is how do cells metastasize? If
I was
someone
just going
has
to ask that.
yeah, see? So we're on the right page, on the same page. So let's say someone has a breast cancer. Any cancer, pick the location. How do they leave the breast and go to the lung or go to the liver? That's kind of a unique process. And this, I mean, this is a long topic. We could talk forever, right? But cancer is an intelligent. Cancer is not bad luck. Cancer is not because God gave it to you. Cancer is not because you deserve it. These are things that patients have told us that their oncologists have given them the reason why they have cancer. Bad luck. What did you do to deserve this? You know, God gave it to you.
Yeah.
Or so. No, cancer is an intelligent, opportunistic, terrain-driven process, as we mentioned earlier. So cancer cells in the primary tumor, they have to leave that tumor. And those are called epithelial cancer stem cells. To go through the matrix, the extracellular space, they have to transition. So they take off their shirt and then they become...
Oh, don't do that.
Then they become mesenchymal. When they take off their shirt, they become mesenchymal cancer stem cells. They transition through the cellular matrix and then they go into the bloodstream. And in the bloodstream, now they're called circulating tumor cells. And those are the cells that now can go and find another distant organ. To do that, in the bloodstream, in the blood vessel, they can be circulating there for years or months, and this is the so-called remission, right? But they're still circulating. So what if there are tests that can look for circulating tumor cells? And that's beautiful, because now if a patient is in so-called remission and we're looking for circulating tumor cells and we detect some and we could destroy them, then the patient has far, far less possibility of getting metastasis. So just to finish the metastatic pathway, then they're in the bloodstream, the circulating tumor cells. They adhere to the vessel wall. Now they put their shirt back on and they become epithelial cancer stem cells again. They leave the blood vessel wall and now they adhere to the organ or tissue next to the blood vessel. That's how metastasis happens. So knowing that, now we know that how we can target these cancers, right? And how we can look at cancer from the mechanisms, not just attacking the tumor and having failures or chemotherapy and radiation.
Yeah, well, that's pretty wild, and I really appreciate that explanation. And thanks also for not taking your shirt off. No, but my next question actually was going to be, why is cancer so difficult to treat? But I think you just kind of explained why it's so difficult to treat with what we were talking about. You know, the stem cells, the 1% kind of being the hidden piece of it that people think it's gone, but it's not really. And then the metastasis, it's pretty self-evident why it's so difficult to treat. But so why did you decide to get into this? I mean, it's such a pervasive, such a difficult thing to work with. Why did Dr. Jimenez decided he wanted to start a cancer clinic?
Well, you know, early in my career, doing my internship, I was blessed to do my internship in a hospital that had an alternative medicine wing. So I would see what was going on there and then see the conventional world. And I began to see differences, right? These patients down here in the conventional world, they were sad. They were getting all these drugs. They weren't ever leaving their hospital room till they were discharged. Well, they would leave to go get a CAT scan or an X-ray, right? But that was it. And then in the alternative medical wing, these people, even though they had cancer, they seemed to be happier. The doctors were being more engaging with them. And, you know, oftentimes the nurses would take them out for a walk, even on wheelchairs, you know, to get some sun, to get some fresh air. So I started seeing their outcomes and just their perspective. And, you know, things started to shift in my brain. And shortly thereafter, my dad, who lived in Texas at the time, was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And he went to a prestigious hospital in Texas, and he called me and said, "Son, I can't do this anymore." I'm like, "Do what?" Because he hadn't told me about his diagnosis, right? So then he told me, and I said, we got to get you out of there. And the rest, thankfully, thank God, my dad was cured from cancer. I could say that because he was diagnosed in the early 60s and he passed away in his early 80s. Nothing to do with prostate cancer, it was heart disease. So, it was a successful outcome. So early on in my career, I figured it out and I knew I had a lot to learn because in medical school, you don't learn anything about just one basic principle in health is nutrition. And we had no clue about nutrition coming out of med school and our training. So that was a big push in my life. And then maybe fast forwarding a little bit, when I opened Hope for Cancer, our first clinic, one of our first patients was a little girl that was 6 years old with leukemia. And her mom was running away from conventional therapies because they had told her that 50-50, 50% that you'll make it with chemo and maybe a bone marrow transplant, and 50% that you won't make it. If you make it, if it works, 100% that you won't have any children. So the mom didn't like those statistics, brought her to us, and now she's my daughter. I have 2 grandchildren with her, and then, of course, her mom is my wife. So, it's how God aligned everything. Because I never had an idea that I would be working in this and in Mexico having clinics. I wanted to be a surgeon. I was going to go to Oxford and do all these other things. But you know very well, right, being a believer, that we have our plans, but God opens the doors and closes others, and all to our betterment.
Yeah, well, man, what is it? Man plans his steps, but God guides his path, or something like that. And I think that's really cool that you were able to, I don't know, press in by faith into what God had for you, because that can be difficult to do, especially when you have a conception of what life is supposed to be like or what you're supposed to do. But that isn't always what God has for us. And I think it's phenomenal that you've created this clinic and you've been able to demonstrate tremendous success rates with what you have. So with the therapies that you bring to the clinic and the approach that you brought, how did you go about finding that approach and those treatments that became Hope for Cancer?
Right. Like I said, it was very little to do with medical school. Of course, the medical training was key, right? Because that sets the foundation for everything. And then I became a naturopathic doctor as well. But it's been a long journey of almost 30 years. I've literally traveled the world. I've been to over 70 countries. I just got back from Europe a few days ago, so I'm happy to be here without any jet lag. And but yes, colleagues everywhere in the world sharing information, learning, researching, always though knowing that what I'm going to implement as the Chief Medical Officer of Hope for Cancer will not harm the patient, right? That's the first law. It won't harm the patient. And if you have enough data, enough statistics, some, but enough science behind the protocol, the therapy, the product that you're comfortable in, that you would even take yourself as a physician. Most, if not all, of the therapies that we offer at Hope for Cancer, I've done myself. And I could tell you that, 70+%, if not more, of conventional oncologists say that they wouldn't give themselves what they give their patients, right? So it's been traveling the world, conferences, meetings, research. We have a R&D team on our staff now, composed of a number of people looking at patient outcomes, looking at products, therapies, and it's just been a blessing.
Well, that's amazing to hear that you went out there on your own volition to find these treatments that would work for people, because there's not a whole lot of doctors that would do that, I don't think. And I think it's just a testament to what you've built and also the results that you're getting.
Yeah, and even now, my wife told me that last year in 2018, I was home 90 days out of the whole year. So, out of 365 days, I was home 90 days. So even now, I'm still searching, because every day cancer is more difficult. People are more toxic, social media and everything else, right? It's surely not as simple as it was when I started treating cancer.
So who are you treating? And I mean, we know you're treating cancer, but maybe a little bit more specifically, who are you treating? And why
Yeah.
do these people typically choose you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because recently I was at a intense workshop at Harvard, and it was about tumor microenvironment. And one of my mentors, at least from a literature perspective, Dr. Robert Weinberg was there, and we had a chance to discuss several things. But he's the co-author, dating back to the year 2000 and then 2011, on the hallmarks of cancer, the 10 hallmarks or characteristics of cancer. So when someone asks me this question, is what cancers do we treat? Who do we treat? We're treating the mechanisms, the hallmarks of cancer. We're not treating a breast cancer or a prostate cancer, right? We're treating what are the mechanisms, and some of them I could explain. One is inflammation. Cancer for sure is a chronic inflammatory disease. Secondly is cancer cells manufacture their own blood supply. That's called angiogenesis. Thirdly is that cancer cells mutate, like I mentioned earlier, to adapt. Cancer cells recruit neighboring cells. That was proven out of the University of Iowa, with studies that they made, that a cancer cell will emit like a rope or a lasso to recruit neighboring cells to further their cause and enlarge that tumor. So there's 10 of these hallmarks that are characteristics of all cancers, independently of the cancer name or cancer type. So who do we treat? We treat anyone that has the malignancy. Of course, treating children is the dilemma, right? Because it's unfortunate what the laws are with minors, and so we're a little careful with that. Even in Mexico, we need to have special equipment and technology and rooms to treat children. So anyone above the age of 17, 18 years of age with any type of cancer are candidates to receive treatment at Hope for Cancer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't know that about the kids. Even in Mexico, you have restrictions there. And I know part of the reason you guys are right in Tijuana, across the street from San Diego, basically. But that gives you a lot more access, or people from the United States have a lot more access to you guys because it's so close. But you can also do a lot of the things that you would be restricted to do in the United States.
Yes, and we have a second clinic in Cancun, Mexico, that we opened in 2015. And it's not like Mexico is a lawless country. It's that they still give the doctor the benefit of the doubt, that the doctor will do what's best for the patient, right? And that's the premise of medicine in Mexico and some other countries around the world, not so handcuffed by the FDA per se.
Yeah, I mean, the FDA is a weighty organization, being able to determine what is medicine, what is not medicine, what you're allowed to use, what you're not allowed to use. So they have a lot of weight. And, just by the nature of having those rigid rules and regulations, you're just going to omit a lot of things. So it kind of makes sense that you would, especially for something that's as difficult as this, that you would need to call in the cavalry, so to speak, or you would need to have alternative options. But would you say, when you're looking at integrative doctors, there's a number of integrative doctors that people could go to, would you say your approach is different? And maybe this would be a good time to kind of introduce the 7 principles as well.
Yeah. It's different in the fact that throughout these years, I've basically summarized what approach needs to be given to a patient with cancer to have the maximum potential benefits and favorable outcome. Meaning, if we adhere to these 7 key principles of cancer therapy, then we're complete. We're addressing the hallmarks of cancer, we're addressing the mutations, and we're really taking into account a holistic view, which is the spiritual, emotional, and physical aspects. So if I could go through them very quickly, the first key principle is non-toxic cancer therapies. So as I said earlier, we have a bias toward doing non-toxic therapy, and 92% of our patients are stage 4 failed conventional therapy, so chemo is not even an option, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly is to work on the immune system. The immune system takes care of us from a cold to cancer and everything in between. Immunosuppression is a hallmark of cancer. Cancer cells suppress immune activity in many ways. That's a topic for another conversation, right? So that's the second key principle. The third one is detoxification. You alluded to heavy metal toxicity. Well, this is where we address that, and not only heavy metal toxicity, but toxicity of thoughts, right? A negative thought can kill you faster than a bad germ. The third one is, of course, nutrition. And nutrition is a big topic. The key here with nutrition that I found in clinical practice is rotate your nutrition. Every 3 to 4 months, slightly vary your nutrition plan, because there is some evidence now that cancer cells can adapt to a particular nutrition program. We've seen that patients come to us and they, hey doc, I was on a ketogenic diet, or I was on a paleo diet, or I was on a Hope for Cancer diet, whatever, and then I was good, and the cancer started to grow again, right? So we have to tweak nutrition every 3 to 4 months. The next key principle is the microbiome. That's gut health. And not only the internal microbiome, but the external microbiome. Very, very important. And then we talk about the emotional, spiritual aspect of health that is so important, as we mentioned before. So we have the non-toxic cancer therapies, the immune system, detoxification, nutrition, immune system, the microbiome, and then the emotional, spiritual aspect of health.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, all of us should adhere to 6 of them for prevention and to decrease our risk of getting cancer, right? The 7th one, which is the non-toxic cancer therapy, is inherent for those with a cancer diagnosis.
I was actually just going to mention that, and for the viewers watching too, you might notice that little book to the left of Dr. Jimenez there that is going to outline what you very briefly did, but just what are the 7 key principles of treating cancer. And, you know, although we're about to go in a little bit deeper into oxygenation and how that works with cancer, I think it's important to say that the method that you bring to the table, the 7 key principles, cannot be separated or compartmentalized into categories. That everything, I mean, even just looking at what you're doing, I was noticing, well, this affects that, which affects this, which affects the other, and it's very interwoven with each other. So although we're going to be talking about oxygenation here, I think it's really important to note that his approach is not oxygenation. His approach is the holistic, the well-being of the person, and he's encapsulated that in the 7 key principles. And that's a book. Where can they find that book?
Yes, the book is hopeforcancerbook.com. So hope, F-O-R, for cancerbook.com. And they're ready. They're being shipped out. And this has been called in some countries and some colleagues as the Bible. There was a very prestigious person, I can't say his name, but he said he's never read a book in the last number of years that is as precise and complete as this one is with respect to integrative cancer therapy. So I'm very proud of that, hopeforcancerbook.com. And as you said, the 7 principles to remove fear and empower your healing journey. So important, because fear is like the number 1 emotion that a cancer patient has, because they were given that prognosis, right? Mm-hmm. You have 6 months to live. You have, in 5 years, you probably will be dead, whatever it is. So here we talk about those 7 key principles, and oxygenation is one that is very important within the holistic approach.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this. I really believe that every single person should read that book, because even if you're not affected by cancer, the stats show that somebody you know is going to be affected by cancer. And you're going to better equip yourself to prevent cancer, to help people who get cancer, if you just read this book. I mean, it's a great starting place to go through. Even if you're not, at the whim of cancer at this point, you're in probably a better place to read it than if you first get diagnosed with cancer. So I really think that everybody should read that book. No, it's.
Are you still going on the mission trips? Where is it to? Guatemala?
They just did one. The second. They just did another one to El Salvador.
Oh, El Salvador. Okay.
Yeah. Well, which is a pretty. The country's been in a little bit of turmoil, so it's an interesting place to go. But what I really like about their approach with the SOPMed is that they're trying to enable the local doctors to treat patients.
Right.
And so they do that by going in with the training and setting them up with the equipment, but then also trying to help them to continue that work. So it's not just hey, let's get off here and help people for 5 days, that it's a continuing work over time. So I really appreciate that approach, although there still is a huge need for things like mercy ships and stuff too. So, but I think it's just another piece of the picture, and it's a good way to do it. So I can really support with how they're doing that.
That's awesome, right? Teaching them how to plant so they can reap, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, typically with these types of therapies, and again, it is just going in with one modality, but even, with like some of the light therapies in the ozone, they can be pretty effective for like infections and those types of things. So even though it's not necessarily the holistic view of the patient, that you can still use those tools to treat, the tough infections or those other things that really get knocked out by them. So,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, it seems to be going good.
Excellent.
So let's dive a little bit into this oxygenation stuff. And the reason we're doing that is because our audience, is generally ozone therapy fans. It's an ozone therapy channel overall, although I'm trying to integrate more different topics. We still focus on that. Okay. Why did you decide to add oxygenation to your 7 principles?
Well, it's inherent in the cancer mechanism, in the hallmark of cancer, and way back, as our audience knows, right, our viewers know about cancer being a cell that thrives in an anaerobic environment, right? And so that's well established. And hypoxia, even if someone is getting chemo and radiation, when there is hypoxia or low oxygen levels, the chemo and the radiation will have less effects. So oxygenation should even be followed by anyone, even if they're doing conventional therapy. In addition to that, it's about that microenvironment. It's about bringing oxygen to the healthy cells also. So this is one of those terrain dysfunctions that we were talking about, right? Low oxygenation, and we tend to be shallow breathers. I oftentimes, especially when I'm traveling, I say, Tony, remember to breathe. Take a deep breath, right? Because we tend to be shallow breathers, and it feels uncomfortable when we take deep breaths sometimes. So oxygenation in all aspects. We could live without food for many years. Well, maybe not for many years, but for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do that.
I know someone in Brazil who's what do they call him? She wakes up in the morning at sunrise and just feels all the energy from the sun, and she doesn't eat. And it's been like 25 years. I just came back from Brazil a couple months ago, and this person hasn't eaten for many years. So if that's an example.
That's a bit hard to digest.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah, no pun intended. Exactly.
But we can't live without oxygen for 3 or 4 minutes or so, right? So this is essential to health and wellness.
Well, and I'm just going to take this second here to show something to people that I really like. It's actually this app I have on my phone. I think I'll post a link in the description. I don't get a commission or anything, but it's called State Shift. And it's just a very intuitive way to do breathing exercises. I don't know if you've seen it, Dr. Jimenez, but it's actually great because it just kind of walks you through really easily some of the breathing exercises, and I think it's free. But anyway, I'll post that in the description. But going back to oxygenation, why is that so important? I mean, it seems really basic. We're breathing all day. You said we're shallow breathers, but we're still getting oxygen. Right. Why would we need to supplement it?
Yeah, we're getting oxygen, but the first tissues and organs and cells that get oxygen are the vital organs, right? Our heart, our brain, our liver, of course, our lungs. But at the cell level, we are hypoxic. So we need to actively engage in oxygen-rich methods or therapies. And it could be as easy as eating live green foods, right? Start with changing your nutrition, eating live green foods to increase our oxygen stores. When I travel, which is quite often, I don't take the escalators or the elevators. I take the stairs or I walk. So, just little things. Park further away from the entrance to the supermarket, right? And walk a little more. We tend to be a very stationary type culture in society now. In Europe, I like that, especially like when I go to places like Baden-Baden in Germany. There's so many bicycles and people are bicycling, they're not walking. So we need to improve oxygen concentration. Another reason is because microbes. There's a lot of anaerobic microbes that thrive in low oxygen level at the cell level. And this is another one of those terrain favoring environments for cancer, chronic disease, Lyme's disease, and so many other things. So it's important for that. Oxygen-rich cells will be cells that are less inflamed, right? So oxygen therapies have anti-inflammatory benefits, which is huge. So there's so many upsides to oxygenation.
Yeah, and there's multiple levels to it too. I mean, there's like oxygen metabolism, there's your SpO2, there's oxygen in your interstitial fluid, which would be the hyperbaric stuff. So, I mean, when you talk about oxygenation, it's not just you might have put those things on your finger and it registers 98, 99, which all that means is that your red blood cells have 4 points on them that have something bonded to them. It may or may not be oxygen, but they call it oxygen. But there's a lot of different elements to oxygen, and it's really, like you were saying, it's really easy to know how important it is because you can go without food for, typically not years, but you can go without food for a long time. You can go without water for a few days, but if I were to tell you to hold your breath right now, you might be able to last a couple minutes, maybe for people who are really good, a few more than that, but not very long can you go without oxygen because it's just such a fundamental thing to our body, and it plays a lot of different roles. So how do you integrate the different oxygen therapies, and why do you need multiple? Wouldn't just breathing exercises or just one be sufficient?
Yeah, we, the mainstay oxygenation therapy in our clinic has been since day one, since I opened Hope for Cancer in Tijuana, Mexico in the year 2000, was ozone. I mean, that's been around forever. It's safe, it's non-toxic, multiple benefits. And then we added hyperbaric oxygen. This drives oxygen to the deep cells. And what I like about hyperbaric oxygen also is that during the duration of the treatment at our clinic, it's 1 hour, 3 times, actually 3 times a day. Some patients have it 3 times a week, or some patients have it every day, is that gives the patient an hour just to chill. Because, relax, we're in the fight or flight, sympathetic overdrive, the parasympathetic is dysfunctional. And so this gives time to relax. And that's also happens when patients are having ozone therapy. Throughout the years, what they tell me is like, I don't know what it is, but I just feel better. I have a better sense of just wellness. And sometimes it's hard to put your finger on what that is, but it's across the board. 9 out of 10 of our patients that have ozone therapy tell us this. It just feels good.
Mm-hmm. And so how many different oxygenation therapies, maybe including like the breathing and stuff, how many different ones do you implement?
So we have the nutrition, we have breathing, we have like meditation, exercise things. We have the Vibe machine where patients stand and it vibrates.
That's an oxygenation therapy?
It is, because it's increasing microcirculation. And when you increase microcirculation, you're increasing oxygen stores, right? So that's why movement is so important in health and in cancer patients. And I tell patients, move, 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 move. A body in motion is a body that will heal and a body that will get more oxygen, right? And so besides the lymphatic system and all that. So other oxygen therapies, with respect to ozone, we give ozone transvaginally, we give it transrectally, we give it sometimes as part of neurotherapy. Yesterday I did a session of neurotherapy on a patient with severe lumbar type dysfunction or pain, and do some ozone and then do the neurotherapy. And of course, in the form of ultraviolet blood irradiation, that I think is the most effective of all the ways to use ozone in my experience. And a therapy that I tend to do once or twice a month is do ultraviolet blood irradiation.
Along with the ozone.
Oh, yes, always with the ozone, always with the ozone. Absolutely.
Yeah, two very synergistic therapies. And for people that don't know, the ultraviolet blood irradiation has been proven, we can link to the studies and stuff or just email me, but has been proven to be synergistic with ozone therapy and actually improve the effects of both of the treatments. So you could have standalone ozone or standalone ultraviolet blood irradiation, which is where they take the blood out, expose it to UV lights, and reintroduce it back into the body. Now, when you combine the two, you actually get a synergistic and a boosted effect of both of the treatments.
Yeah, when I do that, you know what I feel immediately? It's like my lungs expand. I take a deep breath, and it's awesome. And the antimicrobial effects of these combined therapies are, as you said, synergistic, anti-inflammatory, and younger people have a hard time keeping up with me, I must say.
Yeah, well, that's good. You're a busy guy, so you need it. But it's interesting too that the sense of well-being, because there's one of the researchers or the research facilities for ozone therapy. They're a little bit more black and white with what they talk about typically, but they felt that the sense of well-being was significant enough in the patients that they were studying that they actually comment on it regularly in their papers, that people do get this overwhelming sense of well-being when they're doing an ozone therapy. And they don't know exactly what the reasoning is for that, but it's been significant enough that even the researchers who are a little bit more black and white, a little bit more maybe bland personality kind of type people you could imagine, I shouldn't say that, but in their papers, but they've commented on that a number of times as well. But
and at the end, how could you argue with results if the patients one after another is telling us about the sense of well-being? It's there, right? I don't have to read a paper to tell me that. I'm seeing it every day. And let's not forget the effect of ozone or oxygenation also kickstarting the immune system, right? When there's lack of oxygen stores or hypoxia, this is going to make a more acidic environment. And when there's an acidic environment, then the immune system is suppressed. The P53 gene, that's the guardian of the genome, is underexpressed. And so just by doing oxygen therapies, particularly ozone, which is my favorite, we're kickstarting the immune system. And I believe direct and indirect ways as well.
Yeah, and we could go... Yeah, so it doesn't basically, it's not just the oxygenation of the system, but also it's a stimulant to the immune system, which is what I was saying about your 7 key principles, is how integrated everything is, because you look at one section and I can, being a little bit familiar with the tools in this circle, kind of see your line of thinking as to why you use this other method over here. So it really makes sense in how you integrate everything, and it's a very, very logical way of doing things.
Yeah. And even, with the oxygenation and the ozone, like you say, we're affecting nutrition, because then there's better uptake of nutrients at a cell that's more oxygenating. We're improving the immune system, the chemo brain for patients that have had, chemotherapy. I mean, across the board, there's so many benefits with ozone therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one thing I like about it too, is you even as a healthy person are able to use it, as well as somebody with cancer, as well as somebody with COPD, as well as somebody with diabetes, very different indications or issues going on. And it can be used for all these different things because of its very fundamental approach. It's assisting the fundamental processes of the body. And I think, in a lot of ways, that's really what all the natural treatments are doing. They're not the antagonist or, kind of forcing the body to make a certain reaction, but they're just assisting the body to allow the healing to happen, which is really what you've put together in a way that nobody else seems to have done. Yeah. When I go online and look at ozone therapy, though, I know maybe some of the stronger advocates of it call it a cure for cancer. And I'm not necessarily saying, I don't look down on that at all. But I kind of wonder if it's accurate. Can we isolate ozone therapy, use it as a cure for cancer? How would you address that claim that ozone therapy by itself is able to cure cancer?
Well, we know that cancer is a multifactorial disease, right? It's a dysregulation of many organ systems, and so we're never going to have, unless God gives us this, right? Which maybe He did. We haven't discovered it yet, right? But we have to treat cancer multisystemically, multifactorially, and ozone is not a cure to cancer. Ozone is an important component of the holistic approach, the integrative approach. I wish it was even a conventional approach to treating, to addressing the mechanism that hypoxia and oxidative stress has on the body. So as you said, it's not only cancer, it's wellness, it's heart disease, diabetes, any chronic disease, and just wellness will benefit from ozone. So it is not a cure, but it is a very, very important part of what all of us integrative physicians, both for treatment and prevention, should indicate to our patients.
And you're not just saying that because you can't call anything a cure?
No, I'm not just saying that because you can't call anything a cure. Yeah. Yes. What we know now, that would be not a wise thing to say, obviously, right? Even now, one of the things I didn't have time to say yet is that we have smart cancers and we have stupid cancers.
Okay.
Smart cancers are 99% of cancers. Stupid cancers are 1%. Stupid cancers are like acute myelogenous leukemia. They have one driver mutation, and you target that driver mutation with targeted therapies such as monoclonal antibodies, and that cancer will be fine. That patient will be fine. Mm-hmm. And so these stupid cancers, which are very, very few, they don't mutate. They have one driver, receptor site, and they don't build resistance. But the smart cancers, the 99%, they're considered smart because they have a lot of driver mutations, right? Mm-hmm. So you block one or two, and then the other mutations are still there. So in medium to long term, you have progression of disease and so forth with these conventional therapies. So getting back to the oxygenation part, to address this smart cancer world, oxygenation is a very important part of that puzzle.
Well, I have a couple of questions. First of all, I may edit this one out, so I don't know. But, do you have any experience with injecting tumors directly with ozone?
I do have experience. I've used ozone in more ways than you can imagine or sometimes even say, but I had a challenge with that. When we were injecting tumors with ozone directly, we were having good results in stopping tumor progression and keeping tumors at bay. And not only that, decreasing tumor size. But what we found in a number of patients is when we stop injecting the tumor, then we have progression. I remember a patient by the name of Gwen years ago who had a rectal tumor that came up from the rectal area, went into the vagina, and it was just a huge tumor. And at that point, I was doing a lot of treatments. I didn't know exactly what else I could do. So I said, let me start injecting that tumor with ozone. And I did. And to my surprise, it was good. The tumors were decreasing, less bleeding, because we know that ozone is also a hemostatic treatment, right? Decreases bleeding. And so then I had to go on vacation. This is like I didn't have to, but I needed to go on vacation. This is like 3 months after I started injecting the tumor. And I told Gwen, I said, okay, my colleague, my assistant doctor will continue this treatment. And she said, no, Dr. Tony, no one has seen this tumor, not even my husband. I've seen it, you have seen it, and one other doctor in LA. And I don't want anyone to see this tumor, and I want to wait till you come back. Well, I came back after a week and a half, 2 weeks, and the tumor had grown significantly. So I think it was because we we stopped injecting it with ozone. I've had similar experiences like that, so I'm kind of in the gray zone with that at the moment.
Yeah, and because it seems to be logical, an anaerobic tumor
Hmm.
getting infused with the oxidative molecule could be beneficial. And I've seen, different things on forums. So I was just curious what your experience was
Okay.
with that.
Yeah.
Um, but could we dive a little bit deeper into what is the ozone actually doing in the body that's benefiting the cancer, not benefiting the cancer, but benefiting the body in the way that it's actually inhibiting the cancer or making it more difficult for the cancer to thrive?
Yeah. Well, it always goes back to what? The 7 key principles. So, as we mentioned earlier, it's jumpstarting the immune system, it's decreasing the acidity in that extracellular matrix or ground regulating system. It has the antimicrobial benefits that we know. The question is here, not the question, is the correlation with parasites, fungus, bacteria, viruses, and even Lyme disease in the cancer diagnosis. So always, always a complete anti-cancer program should include ozone as an antimicrobial therapy. That's been my experience for almost 30 years, and I'll never stop using ozone, if nothing else, for that benefit. There's many other things, but I'm just saying that antimicrobial benefit, right? We're getting increased vascular perfusion. I think we're improving microcirculation, and most chronic diseases are a consequence of poor microcirculation because we're used to treating large vessels, right?
Mm-hmm.
But disease starts at the micro vessels. So ozone is increasing vascular perfusion at that level, and that feeling of general well-being. Wow, if a patient could feel better and have a sense of wellness, then they're able to, think clearly. They adhere more to their therapy. These are the intangibles of ozone therapy that I like, right? The intangibles. So it's quite a unique combination of many things, and ozone really affects or helps, benefits all those 7 key principles.
Yeah, and two, I think it's good that you do the hyperbaric as well, because they're not the same thing.
Right.
Whereas ozone therapy, it's increasing oxygen uptake, which is basically your body's ability to metabolize the oxygen and use it in the body. Whereas the hyperbaric oxygen is actually forcing oxygen into interstitial fluid. It's forcing it into areas that might not be present. So they're very complementary to each other, and they're both very useful.
One point on that, I was working
Sure.
with Cuban researchers and Cuban clinicians with ozone therapy, because that's one of the countries where they've done a lot of work. So maybe some of them can be considered the grandchildren of ozone pioneers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a question initially: how much oxidative therapies can we safely do in a patient, specifically with not end stage, but advanced cancer?
Yeah,
Is
fabulous.
hyperbaric, right? Is hyperbaric too much in combination with ozone? And initially that was their thought. But my experience didn't show that. My experience showed that combining the two, even on a daily basis, was giving our patients benefit. So then after a year of going back and forth and looking at clinical results with our patients and them doing a few little studies on animals, the conclusion was, hey, Dr. Tony, keep on doing what you're doing. And sure enough, we're giving hyperbaric chamber treatments 1 hour a day, usually, to our patients, in addition to either the UBBI, which we do 3 days a week, or the transvaginal or transrectal ozone, which we do after the coffee enema.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a fabulous question that you brought to light, because there probably is some sort of threshold of too much oxidative stress with the different things that we're doing. But you definitely haven't hit that, and a lot of people haven't with ozone. I always compare it to like exercise. Doing exercise is good for you. It's going to make you more healthy. Do it on a regular basis, but don't overdo it. Don't go crazy with it. Don't exercise 7 hours a day, because you're only going to start to break down your body. And
Right.
so the same could be said with ozone, because it's an oxidative stress. So it actually stimulates your body by giving it just a little slap or a little bit, hey, go on and get started. But you don't want too much of that to where you're getting pounded by these oxidative therapies. So that's where ozone therapy, the dosing is important. You know, there's a huge window of it, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to do 15 treatments a day. You know, you don't want to do 15 hours of hyperbaric oxygen. But with what you're doing, and a lot of doctors are doing, it seems to be very safe to be doing ozone therapy on a daily basis along with hyperbaric oxygen.
Yeah, and then you're doing the nutrition, you're exercising, you know, you're drinking plenty of water, and so it's all mitigating any potential excess of oxidative stress.
Right. Yeah. All those things are super important. And do you do antioxidant therapies too?
We do. We do. Some of them we do actually intravenously. We do green tea extract, EGCG, IV.
Okay.
We do curcumin, which is a very potent antioxidant intravenously. We do resveratrol intravenously. Vitamin C, of course, intravenously. So we have a lot of herbal therapies that are very potent. Ginger. We're doing ginger intravenously as well. And our latest one is boswellia, frankincense, that we're able to do that intravenously. So yeah, it's a beautiful combination. Of course, it takes experience and practice, and always making it personalized to each patient, of course.
Well, you know, most of those are food, right?
Exactly.
No, I just kidding. But so why are you using these different, I know this is away from the ozone, but why are you using like ginger or frankincense for people who aren't familiar with that? You know, I've always thought of that as something I consume, not that I put in my vein.
Right. So when we do it intravenously, we're having excellent uptake, of course, 100% absorption intravenously. And remember, 92% of our patients are stage 4. They have a lot of tumor load and a lot of free radicals, right? A deficient immune system, a lot of inflammation. Metabolically, they're taxed. So we have to drive that and push that. If we do it with nutrition, it's going to take a lot longer, and sometimes we don't have that time with the patient. So it's like taking intravenously, it's like taking what they take orally, like, you know, to the 1,000-fold for maximum absorption and benefiting. You get quicker results. These triple negative breast cancer patients, very aggressive patient type cancer, with the ginger extract intravenously, with the curcumin intravenously, and others, we're seeing really good results.
On a personal level, I'd be very interested to try those. That'd be something. I'm sure they have some beneficial results, especially after you know, tough exercise or something like that.
I've done it.
Yeah.
I've done. Yeah.
So how many of the therapies do you do on a regular basis?
Well, I take a lot of supplements or nutraceuticals, right? Because no matter how healthy we eat, and because I travel a lot, we're just not getting all the nutrients we need. So the body is a food body first, and then a supplement body. So we have to remember that. We have to resonate towards food and then supplementation. But I believe nowadays in 2019, we need to avail ourselves to supplements and rotate these supplements every 3 to 4 months as well. And then with respect to therapies, ozone, hyperbaric, coffee enemas, you know, sauna, near infrared sauna. I do these somewhat regular. Hyperthermia, I wish I could do more than I do, but that's another therapy I really like. And I don't exercise as much as I should, but you know, that's on the radar to keep in mind. So what I recommend to the viewers, and especially if you're someone with cancer, is that every day when you wake up, think, what can I do better today than yesterday? And maybe focus on those 7 key principles. How can I improve my oxygenation today than yesterday? Right? How can I improve my nutrition, emotional, spiritual, immune system, and step it up a notch every day, right? And make this part of a healthy lifestyle, not like, oh, I have to do that now. This is part of a healthy lifestyle.
Well, and you'll start to enjoy it because you get the benefits from it. So once you kind of condition your brain that, oh, this is something that feels good, you know, this is something that I actually like, your body starts to crave it after an amount of time. And it doesn't need to be this overwhelming, hey, 7 principal burden on you right now, all of it, let's go.
Right.
It can be kind of, especially if you don't have cancer, kind of just one step at a time, one day at a time of doing one thing better, or maybe you don't get to the point that you're doing everything, but you're doing a good portion of things. That's good too.
That's right.
So I really want to pick your brain on just all these different things, but I don't want to turn this into Micah just asking questions he's curious about. I am curious about the ozone stuff, but there's a lot of other questions too. But going back to ozone, are there times that you don't use ozone therapy for cancer?
Not very often. If someone is actively bleeding, that might be a contraindication, especially if they have, cervical uterine cancer and they're bleeding because of the tumor there, or colon cancer. You could produce a bit more irritation in that area, so we hold off there. We are kind of careful, especially with ultraviolet blood irradiation with ozone. If the hemoglobin is below 10, right, we're a bit careful in that sense. And, I just like ozone in all ways. If we can't do the major types of ozone that we discussed, consider minor autohemotherapy, where you remove 3 to 5 mLs of blood, put some ozone in there, shake it up, and then introduce that intramuscular. And you could do that once a week. We have several protocols that I will have to look at them, but minor autohemotherapy is so good to do that ozone effect, kickstart the immune system, antimicrobial benefits. So there's ways that if a patient cannot have ozone per se, we could do minor autohemotherapy with ozone. We could do some injections of ozone and acupuncture point, trigger points. So basically all patients are getting ozone in one way or another. So it's very important that your practitioner or the doctors that are viewing this avail themselves to, ozone devices, that they learn about ozone therapy, start experiencing it, not be afraid of it. It's very safe, it's very effective. And then for any patients that are watching this, for them to avail themselves to a home ozone unit. We do that. We recommend it to our patients, and it's a therapy that has better results the longer you use it. Like anything, right? I mean, the more that you're exercising and eating healthy, well, the better benefits and results you'll get.
And where do you recommend people get their ozone equipment for ozone therapy?
Well, that's interesting because when we first started working with ozone therapy in the year 2000, we were getting it from Canada, a place called Longevity, right? And for a number of years, we're very, very happy with going to Simply O3. I have it written down here, simplyO3.com.
That's genuine. All right.
Yeah. And what I like is that, I'm not the financial guy, so I have to write it down. A complete ozone kit is less than $1,000. And so, wow, right? And I'm sorry, docs that are listening to this, but I'd rather have the patient have an ozone unit at home than going every, few days or whatever to the doctor and spending time and driving and the stress and all that. So, recommend the home unit for the patient. And the one that we recommend is called the Stratus O3 or the Stratus Ozone. You're laughing. Why are you laughing?
Because you're reading it off a paper. So I'll tell this to myself that Dr. Jimenez is at the top of his game, that he's not distracted by what ozone generator these people are getting. They do recommend the Simply O3 ozone generator for people.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if there's other companies and equipment that you're using too, but basically there's a number of different places that you can get this equipment. A lot of it, most of the places it's good, usually when you're above that like $650 mark, that's usually the sign of, well, this is more of a medical grade ozone generator. This is going to work for you to do at home. So there's a few different companies out there that do work. But I appreciate you reading that off the piece. The paper for us.
My cheat nose. Give me a break. I just got back from Europe,
No,
but to that point, this is not our first rodeo.
Yeah.
We've gone to different systems and this and that, and ultimately we want to offer the patient what is durable, cost effective, effective, easy, and all that. So this is the best.
I'm just going to interrupt the show real quick and we'll get right back to it. I promise. But real quick, I want to tell you, if you're interested in ozone therapy at home, this is actually the unit right here that Dr. Tony Jimenez himself uses and recommends his patients to use. So if you're interested in some of the stuff that Dr. Jimenez is talking about, click the link below in the description because we will send you a series on how to get started with ozone therapy at home. And if you're a clinician, you might want to get your feet a little bit wet. You might want to learn about ozone. So this is good information for you too, because it's also going to walk through the basics of what patients are going to be doing for ozone therapy at home. It's going to help you to refer to it. So click the link below in the description of this video, and we will send you information about getting set up with ozone therapy at home. Back to the show. Yeah, well, I really do appreciate that. And it is just a really good way to reiterate to do ozone therapy at home because it's super easy to do. You can do it in under 5 minutes a day, but you're also going to get the systemic benefits of ozone therapy, right. Which doing the blood and the UVI is going to be better, but it's going to be more expensive. And you probably, unless you're with Dr. Jimenez, are going to be doing it once to twice a week at most. Whereas with the rectal insufflation, some people say it's 95% is efficacious. I don't know if it's that high. But even if we're at 30 to 50% as efficacious as the blood work, the fact that you can do it on a daily basis with the ease of doing it and the inexpensiveness, I think makes it a very viable treatment for people and would put it up against some of the blood therapies that are being done. So
I agree. Rectal insufflation, you get into the liver, you get into that, portovenous system, and systemic effects is great.
So I'm looking through some of my questions here. We kind of went through, if you could, I know there's a lot of different ways that you apply it, but we got, some doctors that are watching that are treating cancer in their clinic. How do you administer the ozone therapy typically? What is the frequency? What is kind of the dosing? And it doesn't need to be super, I don't need all the details, just basically ballpark kind of what are you doing with it?
Yeah, you won't get all the details because now the nurses do all that. They have
exactly. He's at the top.
Yeah, but the protocol that I don't like to use that word protocol because it seems too systemic and everyone gets it. But typically, as I said, all the patients get ozone in one way or another. We start with UBBI 3 days a week. Let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. That's a game changer. So UBBI with ozone, always with ozone. Then the rectal insufflation every day following the coffee enema. Yes, coffee enema. Coffee enema is the best way to, as you know, to detox the liver and the gallbladder. And then after that, you do the ozone. It's like literally like for the patients, right? They come out of, even like the big cowboys that come from Texas and New Mexico, nothing's going up that end. And then after like a week, they say, can we have 2 a day? So rectally insufflation is every day. And then, of course, the other modalities with the minor autohemotherapy, the ozone and the acupuncture points, trigger points, painful points is important as well. We don't do too much, for example, ear insufflation. I don't know why, we just don't do it. We need to maybe do it. Maybe we don't have too many ear cancers. No, but, but yes, those are the main modalities we use at home for cancer.
Okay. Well, thanks for adding that in. And if you had somebody who didn't have cancer, but they're just looking to do preventative measures against it, do you think ozone therapy would be one of those things they would do?
Absolutely. And I have an ozone unit. I have the Stratus O3 at home, and we use it, quite regularly. I travel a lot, but it's one of those, we just don't oxygenate enough, right? And so I recommend it for everyone.
Well, we already kind of explained how the 7 key principles are inseparable. To take one as the key is to miss the whole picture. So at any rate, I do want to say again, for the people who are listening to this, you really should read Dr. Jimenez's book, Hope for Cancer, at hopeforcancer.com, because it's going to show you all the tools and principles of not only preventing it, but when you get in that situation where either you or somebody you know has been affected by cancer, you'll be better equipped, that you'll know some of the tools that are out there, that you'll know some of the different nutrition tactics and what you can do to help those people. So I think this is a book for everybody, not just people who have cancer. So again, it's hopeforcancer.com. Go ahead and get that book because it's going to help you out a ton. And did you have anything you kind of wanted to add to that, Dr. Jimenez? I mean, I know you worked really hard on this book. What are some things that you might want to say about it?
Well, I want to say that, as we mentioned earlier, that it's for everyone, right? Because not only does everyone know someone with cancer, but we all want to decrease our possibility of getting cancer. Mm-hmm. And you'll learn that in this book, so share it. My goal with this book is to provide education, right? And I think that this will help our space, our tribe in promoting information, promoting alternatives and options and an integrative approach to cancer. And, you know, for my colleagues that are watching this, these 7 key principles, adhere to them, even yourselves, like I do, to better your chances of not getting cancer. And for the patients, removing fear and empowering the healing journey as physicians, as healers, as practitioners. That's our goal, to empower patients on this journey, which is not easy. So the feedback has been wonderful. We have endorsers from over 15 countries that read the manuscript and love this. So please get a copy.
Yeah. I'll definitely be getting one soon here. I haven't gotten one yet. But if somebody would like to go to your clinic, somebody watching this who has cancer, and I should also say I've read a lot of, I researched Dr. Jimenez a lot. So I spent a lot of time preparing these questions and getting to know him a bit. And also I've sat through a lot of his stuff. So I'm familiar with it. But if somebody is watching this that has cancer, that is wondering what they can do, how can they start the conversation with you guys?
There's 2 ways. One way is to go to our website, www.hope4cancer.com. So hopeforcancer.com. There's a submission, details that you fill out, and our admissions team will contact you within the 24 hours. And then the second way, I'll look at my paper again there, is 619-669-6511. That's 619-669-6511. And our friendly, loving, very experienced admissions coordinator will talk to you. They'll ask for your medical records. If you're a doc watching this, you could talk to one of my assistants. We have a couple of doctors on our admissions team that will be happy to talk to you, go over the case, and determine what the best treatment plan is for your patient, or if you are a patient, work together and have that triangle, the patient, the physician back home, and ourselves working together in the best way possible. We also have an aftercare program. It's called the Home Program Support Team. After the patient is discharged, we're calling the patient every week. Hey, Mr. Smith, how are you? Are you doing the therapies? Any questions? Please get a blood test with your local doctor in 2 weeks, and you do this. So we're always interfacing. That's when I said a truly integrative approach is that engagement with the patient and the medical staff. So that's the best way to reach us. And also, if I can, I want to plug one other thing. In January 2020, our reality show will air. It's called 8 Days. And this was a reality show that will be on the Discovery Network channels. And it's about 8 days, a number of patients and their experience with cancer, their journey. Some of them are follow-up patients, and the other ones are new patients. And they were tracked for 8 days, and subsequently, for other more 3, 4, 5 months and so. So it's a reality show. It's all real. Nothing fabricated, nothing made up. It is what it is. And it'll air on the Discovery Channel starting January 2028 days.
Oh, I didn't know about that. First of all, congratulations. But secondly, I'd be really excited to see that because I think the proof is in the pudding. And you can read all these studies, you can go through all these different things, but hearing somebody say what their experience was really just brings it home because it makes it real and it adds just a layer to it that you can connect with. So I think that'll be pretty exciting. I do have a really tough question for you, though. So from
Okay.
your perspective, how will medicine, yeah, get ready. How will medicine overcome cancer?
How will medicine overcome cancer? When you say medicine, I'll ask you a question before I answer.
Fair enough.
We're talking about the medical establishment, or you're talking about medicine as a drug or a combination of drugs?
I guess in my mind, I'm thinking of it as how will we as a society overcome cancer? I just use the word medicine.
Okay. Well, number one is to education. Education. And this is what I'm doing with my book, Hope for Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing with the reality show. And also another documentary that will air soon called Hope for Breast Cancer, hopeforbreastcancer.com. That's a one-day documentary show that will educate so many people with breast cancer or at risk of developing breast cancer. So number one is education, and like-minded people like us, like all these integrated physicians, really, providing the best that they can with respect to data, statistics. I recently was talking to a director of Harvard Science Group, and she said to me, Dr. Tony, all you have to show is longitudinal studies. That means that your patients are surviving longer. Because conventional medical approach, that's what they show. If this chemotherapy allows the patient to live 6 months more, or a checkpoint inhibitor like Opdivo, Keytruda, it's approved by the FDA.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? I want to show efficacy. I want to show long-term outcomes, right?
Uh-huh.
Not just a patient living 6 months longer or a year longer. That's so-called longitudinal study.
Yeah.
So colleagues that are watching this, let's publish papers. Let's publish case studies, right? Let's be proactive. And I know it's not easy because it took us years to be able to do this because, we're in the thick of things. We're treating patients. We're not researchers. We're not statisticians, right? But maybe as a group come together and the awareness is happening. I'm involved. I'm honorary members of various integrative medical societies around the world in Germany and in Portugal and other places. So this awareness, I think it's the key, and always taking in mind that we have to go back to nature. And that's where the answer is for health and healing and wellness, is going back to nature. And this is one of the things that I talk about in the book, is how we could go back to nature with nutrition and other things. And it's a tough question, as you said, but it's a simple question also to answer. Is awareness, is going back to earth. It's being in tune with our emotions and spiritual life, having that connection with our creator, and seeing the glass half full, not half empty, right? A positive attitude, gratitude for what we have. Every day is a blessing. And then really filtering that information, because I know if there's cancer people that are watching this patient, it's tough because you're given a death sentence. You're told if you don't do this therapy, you're going to die and this and that. So cancer is seldom a medical emergency. There's time to think, there's time to research, and then go in with all your heart, mind, and spirit, and you'll have better results.
Well, and that's why you named the clinic the way or what you did. There is hope for cancer. And I think that has a very deep meaning. We can kind of, just graze over it and not really pay attention to what that really means. But I think it has a very deep meaning in the sense that there actually is, because you are handed a death sentence and you are handed things that are terrifying. So, and I really appreciate what you've put together. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Jimenez, talking with us today. It was a great conversation. I think we went over a lot of good things, and I hope we can do it again in the future. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Blessings.
I'm sorry to take you a lot longer than you probably expected.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry I was laughing when you were doing the endorsement because you're just reading up.
It leads to a good show, interview, or else it's kind of boring, right? No, I'm kidding. But, I was wondering how this was going to go because I've known you, but I didn't know you as an interviewer like this, and you're brilliant. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful. And Andres is even like nodding his head. So.
Yeah, thumbs up.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And Lord willing, this will, be a blessing to many.
I think it will be. I really do.